Hey, JP, just wanted to find out, what did you learn about Jared first over 15 practices that maybe you didn't know through the process of recruiting him and landing him here?
I think when you have the opportunity to get your hands on the players and have a chance to work with them one-on-one, there is a lot of learning from both sides. I learn about him and his personality and how he learns best, and he learns how I coach and teach. Probably the thing that I thought that I didn't know as much about that I could take away from the spring was just how coachable he is. A lot of guys that especially when you transfer, you do have things that you've learned other places. And, he was all in, willing to apply the techniques, apply the fundamentals, apply the scheme, exactly how we were trying to ask him to do it to the best of his ability. And I just thought he was very coachable and open-minded to new thoughts and new ideas, and that was good to see.
Ira?
You talked about kind of how far Derek has come in his time here. How much harder is it in college football today, just to dealing with young players and with recruiting rankings and social media and all the things that they have to deal with, to kind of keep them patient or on task without getting down about maybe how they're playing or not playing earlier in their career? Is it harder now than it was maybe when you first got into college coaching?
Wow, I mean it's a great question, and I probably could go on quite a long rant on this, but I'll try to keep it concise. I do think that everything has been sped up. Guys' expectation of playing time and with transfer portals and recruiting rankings and NIL, there's just so many more things that players have going on in their lives that didn't necessarily exist when I first started coaching. And just the idea from a defensive line perspective, development takes time. And, there was, typically guys aren't ready until their second, third, or even in some cases their fourth year in a program to really be significant contributors. And if you have the depth in your program the way that you would ideally like it to be, that you would like to be able to have guys, in the pipeline coming, developing, and then having to almost, you don't want to say wait your turn, but go through your process of development before it's their time to play. And that's changed, and it's something that I think the best thing we can do from a coaching perspective is just to be honest with guys. We do our evaluations at the end of every season, and we do an evaluation at the end of every spring, exactly where you are in the depth and what needs to happen and how you can grow and improve as a player. And I think as long as those open lines of communication are there, you can offset a lot of the issues that can show up with that expectation of early playing time and all the other noise that sometimes gets in the players' ears.
Chris?
With the young guys in your room, just how have they come along? Patrick Payton, Byron Turner, some of the newer guys like Aaron Hester and Dante Anderson, for example, too.
Yeah, I was really pleased with the development of our young group throughout the course of the spring. And I'll start with Patrick. He's a guy that had an opportunity to practice with the travel group a year ago. I think that helped him a lot in terms of where he is now, because he was able to get that 6 months of putting himself through that process of being in the meetings and going through the work with the older players and seeing how they worked. I thought he made a big jump. Obviously, as a redshirt freshman, he still has a lot of improvement to do, but I could see the jump that he made, both mentally in terms of his understanding of the position and physically just his development over the course of being in the program for about a year. Byron, a little bit different situation, coming off the shoulder surgery. This was like his true freshman campaign because we didn't really get an opportunity to coach him in the fall. And I saw Byron take a huge leap about halfway through spring. I think he was getting more confident in getting his shoulder back engaged. It's one thing to go through the whole rehab process, but then it becomes a little bit of a different process when you're out there striking other people. And you could see him grow in confidence. He's a physical kid. He's a tough kid. and I think the future is really bright for Byron. George, I thought George showed some flashes in this spring of what we think he can bring to us, which right now is be a good pass rusher. He does have that skill set, and I thought he did some good things, although we got to keep getting him bigger and growing his body. Dante Anderson was a really, really pleasant surprise for us. He's a guy that still should be in high school just like Hester, and he came in and he has a natural skill set that I think as we get more time just to work with him and develop him, he has a chance to be a good player for us. And I'll finish with Aaron Hester. I thought he made a jump the last week or two in spring practice. Obviously, he stood on the edge as a high school player, but playing a true defensive end position is a little bit of a change for him in terms of just how he played the run game, how he took on blocks, what he was being asked to do. So I saw significant progress from all those guys, which is what you want. You should see some growth from your young players, and the key now is that we're a better group coming back in August than we were when we left in the middle of April, and that's a lot of work that's going to take place in the weight room and also on the practice field when we have the opportunities to go out there and coach them.
Bob Frontek.
Hey, Coach. Good morning. Curious on the return game. You've had a chance to look at some freshmen, some transfers, some of the veterans too. Who's kind of stood out to you in the spring, and then also, if you can, how do you distinguish a guy from he might be a good kick returner versus he might be a good punt returner, or he could do both?
Well, so we do have some new faces back there. I'll start with the punt return game. I thought Micah Pittman did a really nice job throughout the course of spring. He brings a confidence. He brings an aggressiveness. Just the mindset that he has every time he goes back there, I appreciate. He was very consistent throughout the course of all spring. There was one ball in the spring game that maybe he went after that he probably shouldn't have, but I think he was trying to put that aggressiveness on display. But I was really pleased with where Micah left the spring game. I thought Keyshawn did a nice job in terms of fielding balls. I have confidence that he can go back there and catch it and do a good job back there. So those two guys, and then we had some young guys that we're trying to develop with Sam and Azarie and some different guys back there catching punts, and then Travis J, who got a little nicked up about halfway through training camp, but he was back there catching them as well. To answer your question about how do you distinguish between the two, I think the first thing is, it's a lot more challenging, in my opinion, to catch a punt than it is to catch a kickoff for a couple different reasons. One is just the flight of the ball is different coming off a punter's foot and the spiral and the different rotations that you may get based on who the punter is. And then just the fact that guys are on you so much quicker. There's a lot more contested catches in the punt game than there are, obviously, in the kickoff return game. Kickoff return wise, we have a lot of guys back there working. We're obviously very excited about Winston coming in the spring, and disappointed obviously for him that he was involved in that accident. But there were some other guys that got some really good work. So we have a big pool of players that we're trying to develop from that standpoint. So you had the guys that are back. You had Jakai, who had gotten some return reps. Trey Ward, who had gotten some return reps, Lawrence Toafili, who had done that a little bit for us in the past, more in practice than he had ever in the games. But then you add to that equation a guy like Trey Benson, a guy like DJ Williams, Deuce Spann. All of those guys were back there getting some return work. So the depth isn't going to be the issue. It's just finding the guy that you feel like could be the difference maker that you want to put back there.
Aslan.
Hey, John, I don't know if a lot of guys are really, eager to say they'll fill someone's shoes when there's such a big shoe to fill, like a guy like Jermaine. But Derek's a guy that seems like he really embraces, I'm here, I can do it. Just, it's one thing to say it, but what have you seen from Derek that you think he really has embraced, this sort of opportunity and that he will be able to produce for you guys?
Well, I mean, I try to, like you said, I try to avoid the comparisons or trying to ask one guy to replicate success that another guy has had. But for us to fill the shoes of Jermaine and Kier, because there was a lot of production that came out of the defensive end spot a year ago. Excuse me. For us to fill their shoes, it's going to be collective. It's going to take Derek to be the best version of Derek McClendon he can be. It's going to take Jared Verse being the best that he could be. It's going to take Dennis Briggs to be the best that he could be. It's going to take Leonard Warner to be the best that he could be, along with all the young guys that we touched on a little bit earlier. So I'm not expecting or asking anyone to equal the production, but as a whole and as a collective, obviously we need to fill the void that's going to be there.
Ira?
Yeah, I'm sure Ryan, wasn't perfect all spring, but it seemed like when we were out there, it seemed like he was having a really good spring. How did he perform this spring? And then also, is it important for the place kicker to kind of take ownership of that group and kind of be the leader of that group? And if so, is that something he's more capable of doing or confident doing in year 3?
Yeah, he had a good spring. He was, we chart his kicks. We track, obviously, every team kick that he has. He was over 80% in his makes. He had a couple days where, excuse me, that he was really good. I think the last day we did live kicking, he finished with a 53-yarder. I mean, he had a very, very solid spring. And I do think as you grow in the program and mature, you develop a little bit more of a leadership role, especially within your unit or your position group. And you can see Ryan kind of taking a little bit more of that role on. Really, we got a good group of workers. I mean, when you look at the 2 long snappers being back with James Rosenberry and Garrett Murray, having Ryan back, having Alex back, having Aiden back, guys who have been in the program, there's a good collective of guys who understand what the expectation are and are willing to work. And, Ryan being one of the more veteran of that group, he does have some leadership responsibility there.
Ira?
I had one more question about the ends. Coach Fuller mentioned that, as you guys have got more experience on defense overall and have so many guys that are familiar with the system, there's more flexibility to move guys around. How much is that in the overall package for the ends to, we've seen them kind of come inside, things like that. Is there more to what they could do than maybe just lining up outside, coming off the edge?
Yeah, I mean, we're as guys get more experience and they're more comfortable in what their base assignments are, you definitely can become more creative. I don't think there's really any of the guys that wouldn't be able to translate and understand if we ask them to do a little bit inside in a pass rush scenario. We ask some of the guys to stand up in our 3-down stuff. So there is a little bit of flexibility and multiplicity in what we can do with our defensive end group. Both of them, because sometimes I get this question, all of our guys played both spots end and Fox this spring. We didn't really, designate, hey, this is the group of Foxes and this is the group of ends. Really just because you're trying to create depth and see where guys are best. So, in the season last year, you saw Jermaine played mostly the field. That's where our end plays. Kier played mostly the boundary. That's where our Fox is. In many ways, their jobs are more similar than different. But, we're trying to build the depth of our program to the best of our ability. And so everyone played both spots this spring.
Okay, we're good, Coach.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.